I was pronounced dead for 4 minutes, and when I came back, I refused to speak. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't know how to say what I'd seen without breaking something in the people around me. My name is Daniel McFeet. I was a pastor for almost 20 years. I buried people. I comforted families. I spoke about death with confidence. I thought I understood it. That certainty died before I did. When my heart stopped, there was no tunnel, no rush, no dramatic pull. There was a clean break. One moment I was there, and the next I wasn't inside my body anymore. I didn't feel panic. That's what still disturbs me. I felt clarity before I felt fear. After they brought me back, everyone expected words. Doctors asked questions. My wife washed my face like she was waiting for a sign that I was still me. Members of my church stood outside the room, praying loudly, like volume could pull truth out of silence. I gave them nothing. Not because I lost my faith. Not because I gained some new one. I was quiet because everything I'd spent my life saying suddenly felt thin, rehearsed, safe in a way that had nothing to do with truth. People assume pastors are ready for death. I wasn't. I was prepared to talk about it, not to experience it. There's a difference. In those 7 minutes, something rearranged inside me. Not violently. Precisely. Like furniture moved in the dark. You don't hear it happen, but when the lights come on, you know the room isn't the same. This is the first time I'm saying it out loud. Not because I'm brave. Because staying silent started to feel like another kind of lie. Before that day, my life was predictable in the best way. Early mornings. Coffee that was always too hot. Sermons written at the same desk I'd used for years. I knew what my weeks looked like before they started. I wasn't unhappy. I wasn't desperate. I wasn't searching for something new. I led a mid-sized church in a quiet town. Not famous. Not struggling. The kind of place where people nod when you speak and shake your hand after. I was good at it. Comfortable. My faith had structure. Clear answers. Clear language. I believed the right things and avoided the wrong ones. I told myself that was wisdom. At home, my wife and I moved around each other easily. Years of shared routines. We talked about normal things. Groceries. Bills. Weekend plans. Death wasn't something we discussed unless it was someone else's. That week, I remember feeling tired, but not alarmed. The kind of tired that feels earned. I'd visited someone in the hospital earlier that day. I prayed with them. I told them God was near. I believed it when I said it. That night, I was preparing notes for a Sunday message. It was about peace. About rest. About trusting what you can't see. I remember smiling at the irony later, but at the time it felt ordinary. There was no sense that anything was about to break open. No warning. No inner voice. Just another evening where I assumed tomorrow was guaranteed. That assumption didn't survive the night. I woke up on the floor. At least, that's what I was told. I don't remember falling. I don't remember pain. One moment I was standing in the kitchen, and the next moment doesn't exist in my memory at all. My wife found me minutes later. She said my eyes were open, but I wasn't there. My body was rigid in a way she'd never seen. She called my name until her voice broke. I didn't answer. The ambulance arrived fast. Lights. Hands. Commands spoken over me, not to me. My heart rhythm was wrong. Then gone. I didn't experience that part. There was no fading. No slipping away. It was more like stepping out of a room and realizing the door had closed behind you without a sound. Suddenly, I was aware without weight. Without breath. Without urgency. I wasn't floating. I wasn't moving. I was simply present. I knew something was happening to my body, but it felt distant, like hearing about an event in another city. Important, but not immediate. What struck me most was the order of it. No chaos. No confusion. Just a shift in perspective so complete that returning to the old one felt impossible. I didn't think, I'm dying. I thought, this is different than I was told. And then something else began. I became aware of my body the way you notice a coat you've taken off and forgotten on a chair. It was mine. Familiar, but no longer where I was. I could see the kitchen from above, though above doesn't quite fit. Distance didn't behave normally. I understood where everything was without measuring it. My wife was kneeling on the floor, her hands shaking as she tried to remember what to do next. Her voice sounded thin, like it had to travel through water to reach me. I felt concern for her. Real concern. But it didn't pull me back. My body looked smaller than I expected. Heavy. Incomplete. I noticed details I'd never paid attention to before. The way my hand was twisted, the way my chest didn't rise. It should have scared me. It didn't. What unsettled me was the clarity. My thoughts weren't racing. They weren't emotional. They were clean. Precise. I understood that I was separate now, and that separation felt natural, not wrong. I tried to move closer to her, but movement was an effort. It was intention. When I focused on her, I was already there. When I focused on the doorway, I was there too. Space had become optional. I realized then that I could perceive more than just sight. I felt the weight in the room. Not emotional tension, something deeper. Like a pressure that had always been there, unnoticed. And beneath it all was a calm awareness that this moment mattered more than anything I'd prepared sermons for. Not because it was dramatic, because it was honest. I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel watched. I felt expected. The presence arrived before I noticed any change in the space. There was no sudden light, no voice, no figure stepping forward. Just a shift, like when a room fills with someone important and conversation dies without anyone asking it to. I became aware that I was no longer the most solid thing in my awareness. The presence didn't announce itself. It didn't demand attention. But everything in me oriented toward it automatically. Not out of fear, out of recognition. I wanted to speak. Not with words. With meaning. Questions formed without sentences. They didn't leave me. The presence felt calm, but not distant. Close in a way that stripped away pretense. I understood immediately that nothing could be hidden here. Not sins. Not doubts. Not the small compromises I'd explained away as wisdom. What overwhelmed me wasn't judgment. It was accuracy. I felt seen in full, without commentary. The version of me that preached. The version that doubted. The version that enjoyed certainty more than truth. All of it was present at once. I waited for reassurance. For affirmation. For something familiar. None came. Instead, there was a quiet steadiness that seemed to ask nothing and reveal everything. I sensed that I could remain here, observing, or move deeper into whatever this was. The choice felt real, even without explanation. I realized then that belief had never been the point. Attention was. Without words, something was shown to me, not like a vision, but like a realization placed gently into my awareness. I had believed that clarity came from answers, from statements made with confidence, from having the right explanation ready at the right time. That belief didn't survive here. I saw moments from my life replayed, not in sequence, but in significance. Conversations where I'd spoken correctly, but listened poorly. Comfort I'd offered that was technically true, but emotionally hollow. Sermons that sounded strong, but avoided uncertainty. None of it was condemned. It was weighed. I understood that I had mistaken certainty for faith, that I had confused structure with depth. I'd built a system that worked well for others, but protected me from facing what I didn't understand. The correction wasn't harsh. It was surgical. I felt the difference between speaking about truth and standing inside it. Between guiding others and being willing to be undone myself. What struck me hardest was how subtle the error had been. I hadn't lied. I hadn't rebelled. I'd simply stayed safe. Here, safety had no value. I sensed that many of the things I defended were not wrong, but they were incomplete. And I had stopped there, mistaking the partial for the whole. The presence didn't accuse me of failure. It revealed my avoidance. And that was harder to face than any punishment would have been. The space around me changed without motion. One moment there was only presence, and the next there was depth, like distance unfolding inward instead of outward. Two paths appeared. Not roads. Not corridors. They weren't dramatic or marked. They were states of movement. One felt narrow but alive. Not difficult in the way people describe hardship, but exposed. Like walking without armor. Every step required awareness. Nothing could be done automatically. The other felt smooth. Wide. Familiar. It carried the comfort of repetition. Of systems that run themselves. Of never having to stop and ask if you're still awake. No voice explained them. No labels appeared. I understood them anyway. The first path required attention. Constant, uncomfortable attention. The kind that doesn't let you hide behind language or role. It didn't promise growth or reward, just honesty. The second path promised usefulness, influence, continuity. It felt productive, safe, respected. I realized with a quiet shock that I had already been walking the second one for years. That was the moment fear entered, not sharp, not panicked. Clean fear. The fear of recognizing yourself without excuses. I sensed that both paths were allowed. Neither was forbidden, but only one led anywhere real. The presence remained still, letting the truth stand without pressure. And I knew that choosing wasn't about stepping forward. It was about letting something end. The scene shifted again, and I found myself inside something that looked like warmth. It felt like a room built from agreement. Everything fit. Every surface was smooth. Familiar phrases echoed softly, not spoken, just implied. I felt welcomed, valued, needed. This was the place of good intentions. People moved through it easily. They smiled. They nodded. They repeated the same gestures I recognized from my own life. Teaching, encouraging, organizing. All of it worked. Nothing was broken here. That was the problem. As I stayed, I noticed something missing. Not pain, not conflict, depth. The warmth didn't reach very far. It surrounded, but it didn't penetrate. Like standing near a fire that looks strong but doesn't heat your hands. I sensed exhaustion beneath the comfort. A slow thinning. People staying busy so they wouldn't have to listen too closely to themselves. I understood that this place wasn't false because it was evil. It was false because it was sufficient. And sufficiency had replaced hunger. I realized how easy it would be to remain here. To be respected. To be trusted. To never be questioned deeply. The presence didn't remove me from it. It let me feel how empty it was becoming. The final shift was quieter. I was shown myself again, but not as I saw me. As others did. I watched people listen to me speak. Heads nodding. Notes taken. Faces calm. Everything appeared right. Effective. Orderly. Then I was shown what mattered beneath it. Moments when someone needed honesty instead of reassurance. Silence instead of answers. Presence instead of explanation. I saw how often I had given the outer version. The acceptable one. The polished one. Not because I didn't care. Because it worked. Here, effectiveness meant nothing. What mattered was alignment. Whether what I said matched what I was willing to live inside. Whether my words came from attention or habit. I understood that truth doesn't need volume. Or confidence. Or authority. It needs congruence. The presence didn't ask me to fix anything. Didn't demand a vow. Didn't show me consequences. It showed me the cost of continuing unchanged. And for the first time, I felt something close to grief. Not for sin. For all the moments I'd almost been real and chose comfort instead. Next, there was no clock. No countdown. No sense of minutes passing. And yet, urgency pressed in from every direction. Not panic. Not threat. Pressure. I became aware that time, as I understood it, was thinner than I had ever admitted. Not short in quantity, but fragile in use. Like something that can't be stored, only spent, and once spent, cannot be examined again. I felt how easily days are filled with motion that goes nowhere. How momentum can mimic meaning. How quickly later becomes a habit instead of a plan. What unsettled me most was that nothing here rushed me. The urgency wasn't external. It came from understanding. I saw that attention is perishable, that once you stop noticing, you don't suddenly wake back up. You slowly forget that there was ever more to notice. I understood then why the silence after my return would matter. Because words can delay. Explanations can soften edges. Silence forces confrontation. The pressure wasn't about doing more, or believing harder, or changing everything. It was about not postponing what I already knew. The presence didn't warn me of disaster. It revealed how quietly life can slip into repetition and still look successful from the outside. And I felt, without being told, that I would not be allowed to carry this clarity indefinitely. What I did with it, soon, would decide whether it stayed alive. The pullback was sudden, not violent but firm, like being interrupted mid-thought and dragged into noise. Weight returned first, then resistance. My body felt too tight, too loud. Breathing hurt. Light stabbed instead of illuminated. I remember fighting it. Not because I wanted to stay away, but because returning felt like forgetting. My chest seized. Air rushed in painfully. Sound crashed back all at once. Voices, alarms, movement. I opened my eyes and immediately wished I hadn't. Everything felt duller, slower, like coming back to a language that suddenly lacked words. Hands pressed on me. Someone said my name. Someone else said a number. I wanted to tell them I wasn't ready, that something was unfinished. Instead, I cried. Not dramatically, quietly, from the confusion of being intact again. They told me later I was awake, responsive, stable. They didn't see what felt missing. When my wife asked me what happened, I looked at her and couldn't speak. Not because I forgot, because I knew that saying it too soon would make it smaller. So I stayed silent. For days. I'm speaking now because silence stopped being honest. I don't have a revelation to sell you. I don't have a system. I don't even have certainty the way I used to. What I have is awareness. That it's possible to live correctly and still miss something essential. That comfort can numb you without hurting you. That being respected is not the same as being aligned. If you're waiting for a dramatic sign, you might wait a long time. What I experienced wasn't loud. It didn't contradict belief. It exposed avoidance. Pay attention to what you keep postponing, to what feels slightly uncomfortable but quietly true, to the moments you smooth over instead of sit with. Not because something terrible is coming, but because something real already is, and it doesn't wait. I came back quiet because I didn't want to explain this away. I'm speaking now because staying silent was starting to feel like choosing the easy path again. And I already know where that leads.